Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Josh Schimmel's publisher and CEO of the Los Angeles Business Journal, and it's a pleasure to be here for part 2 of our Women's Leadership Series. Last week, we held 3 panels on today's work-life balance, getting on boards, and leading through change. Because of the dynamic group of speakers we had, we were able to learn a lot. I know I sure did. Many of us left with actionable takeaways that we can use every day in our personal lives and in our careers. Today, we continue the series with 3 new panels, 3 new moderators, and 9 amazing new leaders to hear from. Next Wednesday, we'll be closing out our series with our keynote and our Women's Leadership Awards, where we'll be honoring finalists and winners in 6 different award categories. So if you haven't registered for next week's awards event, I encourage you to do so. Like our panelists, our award honorees, our finalists, and all of our nominees are absolutely outstanding, and we plan to share some of their stories with you. Let me tell you how today's session is going to work. We're going to be holding 3 conversations, about 30 minutes in length each. The first will be the power of sponsorship and mentorship. Second, navigating today's finance, and then we'll close it with the road to entrepreneurship. Shortly, we'll be introducing our first panel, and we encourage you to learn more about each of our speakers by going to our website and clicking on the links about them. We'll leave the link available on the screen for the duration of today's show. We're also going to be conducting live poll questions throughout the afternoon. So if you joined us last week, you saw and you'll remember that the questions correlate to the topics that we're covering. So when you see the question pop up on your screen, we'd love for you to participate and share your experiences and opinions. We'll then take those responses and we'll publish them in next week's edition of the LA Business Journal, and we'll also put them up on our website. Before we get started, I want to once again thank our sponsors for being a part of last week's kickoff, being part of today's panels, and of course, next week's awards event. We appreciate your ongoing sponsorships and your partnership to help making sure that women's leadership is supported and continued in our community and business. Special thanks first to our diamond sponsor, UBS. Thank you also to our 5 platinum sponsors, Green, Hassan & Jenks, the Pepperdine Graziadio Business School, RSM, UCLA Anders School of Management, and Wells Fargo. Additionally, I'd like to show my appreciation to our many gold sponsors joining us this year: Bank of America, Camden Capital, KPMG, LA Care Health Plan, Miller Barrondes, Montage Insurance Solutions, United Cerebral Palsy of Los Angeles, Ventura, and Santa Barbara counties, the private bank at Union Bank, Union Station Homeless Services, and Vita Ventures. Thank you all for being a part of this. As I did last week, I want to again thank a few of the women here at the Los Angeles Business Journal who contribute so much to our continued success and everything that we do on a weekly basis. So our LABJ Women's Leadership Team, many thanks to Stephanie Barbaran, Managing Editor, Nina Bays, Creative and Production Director, Alex Davila, Executive Director of Events and Marketing, Eva Juicy, Senior Advertising Manager, and Ellen Mazin, National Advertising Sales Manager. Thank you for all you do. We have an amazing team here. We couldn't do it without you. Last week, I introduced our Executive Director of Events. Today, I'd like to introduce our National Advertising Sales Manager, Ellen Mazin, to say a few words. Ellen?
Thanks, Josh. Good afternoon and a huge welcome to all of the amazing women in Los Angeles. I'm Ellen Mazin, National Sales Manager. I've been with the LABJ for over 21 years, and it has been a privilege to grow with this event. From its infancy as a luncheon to the expansion into a half-day symposium and the reimagined virtual series it has become today. Speaking on behalf of our sales team, we are humbled to work with such an accomplished group of women executives, sponsors, and role models. Thanks to all of you who inspire every day, motivate every day, and reach beyond the limits of what is expected and what is ordinary. Please enjoy our second panel session and the compelling and accomplished women we have brought together. Now let's have some fun.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. I'll tell you all, I've had the pleasure of working with Ellen in some capacity for 20 years now. She is an outstanding advocate for women's leadership, for business in general. She's a vital part of our team and just an overall great person. Ellen, thank you so much for all of your contributions. All right, we've got a lot of conversations to be had, so we're going to get right into our first panel now. We're seeing more companies creating formal processes for internal women's leadership initiatives. The concept is expansive to ensuring that both men and women are taking active roles in sponsoring the success of female employees. Mentorship continues to be an important part of building confidence, building relationships, and providing guidance to help accelerate careers. Here to provide some insight, please welcome our first panel, Lisa Chapman, Managing Director with UBS, Mira Hashmall, Partner with Miller Barrondes, and Natasha Mata, Central Los Angeles Regional Bank President of Wells Fargo. And we're looking for someone to moderate today's panel. I didn't need to look far. I knew the perfect person. After all, she's been my professional mentor for 21 years now. She was the former publisher of the San Fernando Valley Business Journal and is one of my closest friends today, all because of a mentor-mentee relationship that started over 2 decades ago. Please welcome my mentor, my friend, Pegi Matsuda, owner of Pegi Matsuda Consulting. And Pegi, before we get started, I officially hand it to you. I did want to take this opportunity to thank you for the countless late night hours providing me guidance, career, and life advice ever since we started working together way back in 1999. Pegi, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Pegi, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Josh. Can you hear me now? Great. Thank you, Josh. And the great thing about a mentor-mentee relationship is that everybody really wins in a relationship like this. For all the advice and guidance that you provide as a mentor, you get it back in so many other different ways, including a lot of learning. So I'd like to say thank you to the Los Angeles Business Journal. I'm really pleased to be here today because I think this topic, at least in my opinion, is one of the most important topics for business and community leaders, mentorship and sponsorship. So whether you're a mentor, you're a mentee, you're seeking a mentor or a mentee, our panelists today, they're going to show all of us the way. So the first question I have is for Mira and Lisa. Mentoring in today's climate is more challenging given demands on time and the inability to be able to meet face-to-face. What are some ways that you encourage effective mentorship during COVID times? And let's start with Mira.
Thank you, Pegi, and thank you for everyone today. I'm excited to hear this panel and all of the panelists this afternoon. What we've realized is that you have to be creative. We've created structured mentoring opportunities where you have a Zoom happy hour and everyone has it on their calendar and they can have it a scheduled activity to really connect and unwind and tell war stories of what everyone's experiencing. But also making sure you make time to do the impromptu phone call or email, or, you know, at the end of a long conference call, take a moment to ask everyone how their day is going so that you keep that human connection beyond just the doing business part of our day.
All right, thank you, Mira. Lisa?
Hi, everybody. So nice to see you today. I think life is not linear. It's something I've always taught the kids and even the clients that I work with. And this is a really great example of a year not being linear. I totally agree with Mira. We've got to be creative. I have been known to show up on a Zoom call with a colored wig. I have a number of different options. I did throw away the silver one because it was a little too close to home, but it's really fun to bring something different and something creative in, especially when I'm working with my mentees from Operation Jumpstart. I think we have to support each other and lift each other. And in that way, when we do that as mentors, I definitely feel that lift back. We used to go to yoga classes together, my group, and now we do it online. So at least we're still online. We can still be together and have that energy and be present together. We watch TV shows. You know, we used to go to concerts. We used to go to movies. We used to travel. And so now what I like to do every week is send a random picture. I'll look back on all these years that we've had together, and myself and the kids will just send a random picture and reframe it to when we were really in some great times, because I think we'll get back there. But it's a nice way for all of us to remember some of the special times and maybe move past this and just let some of that negative go and focus on getting forward.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. The next question is for Natasha. Natasha, how do you measure success when you're mentoring somebody?
Well, first I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be a part of this. And, you know, it's such a great question, Peggy. And, you know, first, before I would even mention anything about a success measure for any mentee, I would say that, you know, I think it's important to establish just a few things before going into a mentor relationship. And for it to be effective, you have to have a mentee that has the desire and the commitment and the initiative to grow in his or her career. I think it's important that they understand that they are the ones that are taking ownership in their relationship. And it's really what they put into it is what they're going to get out of it. And to be more specific, when they're invested in that particular relationship, they've got to be open to fresh perspectives and new insights to support themselves in their current or future roles. And they've got to be open to exposure to other teammates, team members, other leaders across the organization. And sometimes this can be really challenging for those that may not necessarily be comfortable in stepping outside of their comfort zone. And of course, they should have the desire to enhance their own skills and of course, improve their performance. These are just a few critical things that a mentee should have to start. And so if I were to look at a way that I would measure success, there's so many different ways to measure it. And, you know, I would look at one of the indicators for me, for one of my mentees specifically, I would measure it over time. They would increase their confidence level. They'd become a lot more passionate about the relationship that we have. And of course, what they do to apply what they've learned throughout a relationship is really important. And that's one way for me to be able to identify whether or not they are continuing to grow in the relationship. I would consider these three critical areas the sweet spot, quite frankly, and that's how I would measure success initially. Then of course, over time, if they've ultimately achieved their next role and what they've aspired to achieve, that's the true measure of success. And this is typically uncovered through the dialogue or conversation that we have throughout our relationship. So it's pretty easy and more, you know, easier said than done, but at the end of the day, it's definitely something that's a lot more rewarding for the mentor rather than the mentee, in all honesty.
Natasha, I really liked that response you just had, and I got to thinking about something. You know, you had mentioned the word accountability when you have a mentee that's accountable. What are some of the behaviors that you notice that demonstrate accountability?
Well, there's so many, but one in particular is I look for a that is coming prepared prior to establish some sort of connection. And it's important that they have a list of things that they want to accomplish. What is their intent? What's their objective for that particular call or meeting? So that way we can actually determine what that desired outcome is going to look like at the end of that meeting. And so single meeting and connection is going to look differently. And it's going to continue to grow as that relationship grows and as that mentee continues to further their skills and development as part of the relationship. So it's really important for them to come prepared for specific ideas or thoughts that they had in place and are coming prepared to ask questions and are really looking for a specific outcome. And when they share that, that really, to me, shares a lot of how accountable they are and how invested they are in their own development.
Thank you, Natasha. That really that was a really good response, and I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, now Lisa, tell us a little bit about your more formal mentoring role with Operation Jumpstart. First of all, how did you get involved 20 years ago? And just as important, why do you stay involved? Why are you still interested?
So Operation Jumpstart is an at-risk youth program that started in 1994. My husband and I lived in Bixby Knolls, where the program's located, and we really wanted to give back to the community. I think it's easy to give funds. I think it's hard to give time. And this is a program where you're going to be matched with a young lady, in my case, or young ladies over time, and you're going to have a 4 to 5 year commitment to get them through high school and into the college process and help their family get there. It's not a financial program, it's about time. And that's something that I really thought was important and I thought I wanted to be a part of. It's just part of my personal legacy. I ended up, my husband and I ran their Youth Leadership Council. We had Saturday programs there. I was on their board of directors. And getting these kids into college is not just that, it's just what happens to actually get them to college. You know, I had a number of kids end up in very cold areas. We had to get them coats. We had to get their dorms set up. I did this numerous times. We also created unique programs there. We took all the kids one time, if all of you remember when the Tim Burton exhibit was here in Los Angeles, we took all these kids who never had this exposure to the museum and to lunch and to the exhibit. To me, Operation Jumpstart is really the epitome of a great community local service to get these kids to places they can't go. And we were really grateful to give back. At one point, I ended up with 4 kids who are still part of my life, and they still are every day. One of the kids has literally been part of my life for 18 years. More than half her time we've spent together. She's one of the dear loves of my life, and I talk to her regularly. So to me, it was just something really soul-filling, something personal that I wanted to get involved in. And they are looking for mentors. So let's give a shout out to Operation Jumpstart for anyone who really wants to give some time back. And an excellent program. I know Irene would love to hear from you.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Lisa. All right, the next question is for Mira. As somebody who's been on both sides of the mentorship fence, so to speak, as you look back on the people who have influenced you, what is the most powerful lesson that you've learned from a mentor?
That's a great question, Peggy. And I've had some fantastic mentors over the years. So it's hard to even pick one lesson because there are so many lessons. I'm a trial lawyer, and I think it's no secret that the legal field is male dominated. And as a Black woman, I'm sometimes the only person in the room who has my point of view or my experiences. And that was daunting at first. It still is sometimes. But I would say that the lesson that my mentor really instilled in me is just be yourself, because not only is that authenticity going to give you power and strength, but it's also going to give you consistency, right? Because you aren't pretending to be someone else. You aren't guessing as to how someone else would respond to a scenario or a crisis. You're really drawing on your own perspective. And I think that gives you stability and common sense. And that has been a really powerful lesson for me as a lawyer and as an advisor, and to really help me make good calls in my everyday work.
Mira, can I just ask you this follow-up question? When kind of turning it a little bit in terms of, you know, something powerful that maybe somebody learned from you, does something come to mind?
I think the lesson that I try to instill with the young women I work with is, you know, be prepared, probably be over-prepared, but don't get too frustrated when people underestimate you, because I think there are opportunities for women to advance, to achieve by exploiting biases that would on the surface seem like a detriment. So, I mean, that is definitely, I think, a lesson I have heard myself give over and over the years, but I think it's decent advice.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you. My next question is for Natasha. Earlier, you talked a little bit about how you measure success when you're mentoring someone. As you see these mentees, you know, develop in their own careers and move forward, how do you encourage mentees to just pay it forward?
Yeah, gosh, that's another great question. What I would say is always making it a point to draw the connection to the impact that having a mentor had on them and how their experience can make a difference for someone else. You know, additionally, reinforcing how they have the power to influence and shape the future through their own experience. And when I think about experience specifically, experience is a gift, and certainly something that if we can give more gifts to more of our future leaders, my gosh, why wouldn't we do that all day? And so typically that statement and reinforcement alone typically is the difference maker, and that usually does it for me. I've yet to have a mentor yet, basically. It's someone who didn't take that to heart, and certainly I appreciate that.
Great. You know, Natasha, could you give us an example of a mentee that you had that was exceptional in paying it forward?
Yeah, gosh, I can probably give you many examples. If I had to choose one in particular, it would be someone who leaves a legacy behind. Someone who I've mentored for quite some time, and still, even without it being an official mentorship relationship, they still continue to reach out to me, and I continue to still hear their name everywhere I go, and just the difference that they made, you know, to other leaders across the organization. And I haven't seen this individual for quite some time now, but just to think back on, you know, the impact that they made on me in our relationship, it's made a big difference for me as well. So I took a lot away from that relationship, but I would say that that would be an example that I can really think about, that have made not only a difference for a lot of other people, but for me as well.
Great. Thank you, Natasha. You know, my next question is for all the panelists. All right. As we think of the term mentorship, we tend to correlate this term with an informal, kind of one-on-one, you know, talk, put a schedule together, but, you know, kind of talk and engage when it's convenient for both parties. So, however, here's something we've noticed within companies. They are starting to create formal mentorship programs, and where, you know, people are paired up, and there's some very formalized programs now. And another thing that we're hearing more about is something that we're calling sponsorship, where, you know, organizations put leaders and mentees together, and there's like a formal sponsorship and a commitment to their career. So the question I have for each one of you is, how can companies be more involved in the creation of these sponsorship initiatives to ensure that there's a higher level, much higher level of commitment to women in leadership? So let's start with Lisa. Lisa?
We have a great program at the firm called All Bar None, and that gives the ability for management to pair mentors and mentees. They also do regular education to lift everyone's skill set and show them what's out there and teach them different topics. You know, and I grew up in the same as everyone else did here, you know, 36 years in industry. I had to find my own mentors, and I love seeing that companies have something more formal. I've had mentorship on my own team even, and you watch these young people come forward and they end up leading you, and that's been what I'm most proud of with my group. But the firm is really rising to the occasion and starting to work on that, and we try to support it as much as we can.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And then Mira.
So our law firm has pairing. We have senior attorneys who will be paired up with a mentee and be able to kind of guide them through informal advice, identify learning opportunities for them. If they know that there are certain types of cases or certain type of challenges that they're interested in, we'll guide them towards that. And then what I've recently spearheaded is a networking group just for the women lawyers in the firm. We get together at least quarterly. It's been lunch, it's been Zoom by necessity, where we have a safe space to really talk about the types of challenges and successes that we have, and see how we can help each other grow and feel supported. I do believe that we are all dealing with unprecedented challenges. It kind of reminds me of a hike where you think it's easy and then you get up and you realize you're exhausted. I think some of our days working in these sort of unusual circumstances feel that way. And so encouraging people to have a safe space where they can acknowledge those good days and bad days, but realize they're not alone in that, I think is really important to mentorship.
So Mira, I gotta ask you, and I know everybody wants to know, tell us some of the things you guys talk about in a safe space. You don't have to be specific, but what are some of the things that might come up?
Well, binging, I mean, there were some reality shows that really hit big this year. I would say that there was a lot of banter about who was gonna get out of jail and who should have been pardoned or not pardoned. I like to do an icebreaker. I know they're corny, but sometimes they've gotten pretty heated. One of our last ones was like, what is your favorite Mexican restaurant in LA? And like, that is a deeply personal issue for Angelino. So I try to kind of shake it up. I have something in store for the next one. I'm gonna have a Zoom visitor, one of those DJs that will take over our mentorship happy hour, which I may have ruined the surprise, but I just try to keep it light. And we have had some really personal conversations, but it's a cone of silence. And that's, I think is probably the biggest rule of the networking group.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I just had to ask because, I mean, I love secret agendas. Okay. All right. So Natasha, same question.
Yeah, so, I think as leaders, I think we all have the responsibility to create some sort of sponsorship program or whatever it is that we want to call it. And I believe that with every company or any business, that it starts at the top. It starts with the business owner, includes myself, of course, and model that behavior. And this is a critical component in creating a culture with respect to sponsorship. And, when making it a part of their commitment to host a talent management or development review with their leadership team at a minimum each year, and setting the expectation for them to model the same with their respective team is important. That's a big part of creating the right culture. And this provides a better understanding of really knowing who your high potentials are, and that would be obviously included as part of the discussion and as part of your sponsorship plan. So in a nutshell, when you think about the 3 areas of components that I think about, it's leadership involvement, commitment, and collaboration with other leaders across the organization in order for us to establish a really good culture focused on sponsorship.
All right. Natasha, I have some friends that work at Wells Fargo, and I have been very impressed with some of the programs, and formal and informal, on leadership development and how the bank helps, new employees kind of get into the leadership ranks. If you thought about that program, and I know there's many of them, is there like one thing about the Wells Fargo mentorship sponsorship program you want to mention?
Yeah, I would say, our sponsorships and mentorship relationships continue to evolve. And as our leaders continue to grow, it evolves along with them. So we can continue to provide them the best foundation possible for them to learn. And that it's not a perfect cookie cutter, but it's really evolving as they continue to grow. And so there's not a specific name that we put to it or that we label it as, except for just a leadership program. And again, it can vary year after year. It can vary as we continue to evolve. And so I think that's the beauty of the type of programs that we've established at Wells Fargo, is that it's really thinking about what's best for the team member and really understanding where we as leaders can help really focus in on those areas of opportunity for them, so we can ensure that it's as productive as what they want to do it for it to look like.
Great. Okay, thank you, Natasha. I've had the opportunity to work in very big national corporations, and then of course entrepreneurial endeavors such as the Business Journal. And I find that as long as the mentorship and sponsorship programs have some flexibility in terms of pairing you up, in terms of the types of projects you might work on together, I think flexibility in these programs has been really an important factor. All right, so I have a final question for all the panelists, and it is a very simple question, but I'd like to hear some detail from you in terms of if you have any steps. So when somebody wants to find a mentor, they're looking for a mentor, how would they get started? So why don't we start with Natasha?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, there's definitely a few ways that someone may seek out a mentor. And if I had to narrow it down to choose one, I would say through either their current leader or manager. They're typically the ones to know where their strengths of opportunities are. And typically I would recommend that one would want to seek out a mentor who has a strength in an area that's been identified as an opportunity for the mentee. This helps to focus in on a particular area that needs strengthening, or as simple as providing guidance on how to best leverage that particular area as part of their development. Many of the mentees are at different levels of their development, and some mentees are just starting out, and some mentees are way ahead in their career. And we've got to be able to be flexible in identifying how do we now strengthen those areas of opportunity for that mentee, regardless of where they are in their career, and ensuring that we're tailoring our focus and attention as part of our development process, tailoring it to what it is that they need to help them get to that next level. So that's what I would recommend in really choosing a mentor that's going to enhance their strength.
Okay. Natasha, does Wells Fargo have like a formalized, like a questionnaire that potential mentees would, you know, answer questions or kind of things that they would consider?
Yes, we actually have a whole website that we have that's been established on our Wells Fargo website, specifically on mentorship relationships. And we encourage a lot of our talents that are looking to further their career, or they have aspirations in different areas of the business or the bank specifically. We encourage them to go onto that website and really utilize the tools and the resources that are available. The website and all the tools and resources were created specifically for their development. So we want to continue to encourage them to utilize them to the best of their ability and use it to their advantage. Because if you think about all the free tools and resources that we're continuing to provide, because we invest a lot of time and effort and we take a lot of pride in development of our team members, we want to make sure that they have all the tools available so they can be successful.
Great. Okay, thank you, Natasha. So Lisa, how would somebody get started? What would be some of the things that they would do?
I think it's all about the ask. I think looking in your immediate circle, looking outside your circle, asking the people around you where to get started and where for help. Sometimes you don't realize maybe some of the mentoring needs to be personal, some of it needs to be business. I have clients that are great mentors. I have family, I have friends that are great mentors. My walking group on the weekends are amazing. I think asking for help and seeing if someone can give you that direction. I've done that for the kids that I mentor. I've got 3 of them who wanted to go in the medical field and never set foot in a hospital. One of my dear friends and clients was chief of staff of the hospital at Memorial, Long Beach Memorial at the time. He did a 3-hour tour with these kids and me. I got tagged along. We went everywhere. We went from the lab, we went down into the OR. I never want to go there again. But there are people who will help you and help lift you if you can't mentor them yourself, to mentor the people around you. I just think it's asking and knowing that you need help and reaching out.
So Lisa, today, do you think it's easier or harder for people to ask for help?
It's hard. It's hard for me. I think I'm a great failure if I teach one thing to the kids. I think I've had some amazing amount of failure, and that really has got me there. I've had to learn to ask. I realize I can't do it on my own. I have a network of people who support me, and I want to make sure the kids around me, the clients around me, my friends know that I am in their network as well. It's hard to ask. You just have to reach above whatever's bothering you and realize it's not a weakness. I see it as a strength. I want someone to ask me for help. It means they know that either I can help resolve that issue or find a way around it.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Mira, how would somebody get started?
I think you reach out to people that you admire. At the end of the day, you're looking for someone who has tackled something that you think is in the road ahead for you, or is exceeding in a space where you really want to excel yourself. And so put yourself out there, let them know you admire what they're doing, that you aspire to be successful like they are. And I think people are responsive when you explain what you see is the connection between you and that potential mentor.
Has a mentee ever come to you and said, Mira, I just so admire this project you work on and this case that you handled, and I just, can I kind of hang out with you? Can I learn some things? Has anybody ever come to you with that, and how did you feel? Because I bet it's happened.
It's an honor, obviously, when you find that someone who you probably also admire and respect is impressed by something that you've accomplished. And I have people who I don't know if mentee, mentor, I don't know if we have formal labels, but that we try and inspire one another, and they come from all walks of life. I mean, I'm realizing that I have, after 20 years, kind of a bit of wisdom of what it's like to practice law, but I also can learn a lot from these young, very, very enthusiastic people coming out of law school, and they can teach me about technology, which is becoming more and more essential, obviously, these days. But it's great. And I'd also say, push yourself. Don't be afraid to reach out to someone who may seem outside of your sphere, because to Lisa's point, I think the learning goes both ways, and people who have the luxury of a little bit of confidence of having made it, I think are even more able to make time to give back, and they want to.
Great. Okay. I really like your comment about looking for somebody you admired, because it kind of brought back a memory from myself when I was in my 20s and working at a big corporation who eventually became Verizon. There was a vice president that I so admired. I mean, everything, every word out of her mouth, the way she dressed, the way she carried herself, the strategies that she came up with. And I talked to my boss one day and I asked him if he thought it would be all right if I just picked up the phone and called her. And he goes, give her a call. And she became a mentor of mine for many, many years in that corporation. And I really do credit her with teaching me so much about corporate America. So I will be eternally grateful. So ladies, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our time. And I just want to thank our panelists again, Lisa, Mira, and Natasha. You are such an inspiration. I was very inspired listening to your comments today. And we're really grateful, all of us I know on the session today, that you've shared your wisdom with us. And now I'm going to turn it back to Josh.
Well, thank you so much, Peggy. There were a lot of really important takeaways from that first session. You know, Mira, you mentioned earlier on, I love your comment about kind of creating a safe zone, creating a place where, you know, whether it's personal or professional, this is a sacred conversation. Your mentee knows that there's a sense of trust there that won't be violated. Natasha, you mentioned the importance of having the mentee having responsibility and coming in with a plan and what they're looking to get out of the relationship and putting it back on them to some degree, how you can help them in their career. And then Lisa, as is often the case in business, sometimes, as you said, it's all about the ask. If you don't ask, you'll never know, and you'll never have the opportunity. So sometimes you just need to ask for help. And I think we can all do a little bit better job of that at times. I want to thank Peggy, Mira, Lisa, and Natasha for being a part of this. I think this is a great way to kick off today's panels. Now we're going to shift topics quite a bit. So as we know, we've seen unemployment rates drop. We're in an economy that's in flux. The pandemic, unfortunately, has resulted in furloughs and layoffs. Even over the last 2 weeks, we've seen new layoffs, new rounds of layoffs in certain industries. And unfortunately, with all of that comes salary cuts for people. So all this to say, finance is on everybody's minds. Here to talk and to provide some guidance about navigating finance in today's economy, please welcome our next panel, Boccella, partner with Camden Capital, Candice Nakagawa, director and private wealth advisor with the private bank at Union Bank, Nhaman Pelphrey, relationship manager at Abbott Downing, and today's moderator, Grace Kangdani, Senior Vice President, Commercial Banking at Bank of America. Grace, thank you so much for being here and for moderating today's panel.
Thank you, Josh. A pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody, for participating on today's event. And great to be here. And I hope that you, your loved one, family, and friends continue to be safe, well, and healthy during this crazy, crazy times that's 2020. Like Josh mentioned, there's so many things that's going on in today's world, in the economy, and finance and money is top of mind for many people. What I find interesting, and if we were in a ballroom today, as these events typically happen, I would say, let's show a raise of hands of who likes money, want to talk more about it, want to make more of it, and be interested in it. However, a recent report that Merrill Lynch did about women and financial wellness showed that 61% of women would rather talk about their own death than talk about money. Then to follow on to the earlier panel talking about mentorship, some women, like 45% in that report, indicated that they feel they don't have financial role models. So that's why they're not comfortable and confident talking about money. Well, given all the dynamics that's going on right now, we have to talk about money and our finances. Fortunately for us, we have three exquisite, outstanding professional women who are very experienced in their financial field that can share some perspective on how we can best navigate these times in finance. So let's get started. My first question is for Candice. Candice, this year has been unprecedented in economic, social challenge, healthcare, everything all combined in one. So along with that, there's a lot of uncertainties amongst investors. How are you talking to your clients about planning for the future right now? How are they planning for emergency funds or looking at different scenarios?
Thank you, Grace. That's a great question. Although every family situation is different, a general good rule of thumb is to save between 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses to survive a financial emergency like a job loss or a significant income reduction. Unfortunately, many families don't do planning, and the current pandemic situation has exceeded the typical recommendation of 3 to 6 months. At the private bank, Union Bank, we're really driven to build lasting relationships to create and actually implement objective and customized strategies that help our clients achieve their goals and dreams. We do this through a process that we call the Life Wealth Cycle, where we listen, interpret, formulate, and involve with our clients and their families. We plan for emergencies like this and worst case by creating financial plans that provide a roadmap that help us guide to achieve our clients' financial aspirations, whether it's from budgeting to ensuring that you're not spending beyond your means, retirement planning, and advising on more complex planning strategies. So having a financial plan in place can also help create a sense of security while looking at worst case scenarios to prepare families for events such as an unexpected financial disruption like the pandemic. Well, during the planning process, we do plan for the next 30 to 50 years, really long term. It's important to concentrate on the next 3 to 5. It's the decisions that you make now that will have a major impact on your financial future. In general, I would say it's important at any level of wealth to have a realistic goal of what you're trying to achieve, and then actually implementing and remaining diligent in taking those steps to get there. For those who have more wealth than the average person, there are really some additional considerations such as proper tax planning to reduce the risk of missing out on crucial tax benefits. With the recent Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was passed by the Trump administration, there have been quite a few changes to the tax code, which have significant impacts to high net worth individuals. One of those things I'd like to mention is the exclusion limit on gift and estate taxes. The exclusion limit has doubled since 2017, meaning you can leave more money to others while getting your tax break. Really active in discussing how our clients invest in the market. As you may have heard before, it's important to consider your financial goals, your risk tolerance, and time horizons, and to strive to achieve diversity of your portfolios and revisiting them as often as your individual situation changes is very important. High net worth individuals also typically have adequate emergency funds, so their goals tend to be different and are generally more concerned about estate planning and generational wealth transfers. So really reviewing and making adjustments to your financial plan are imperative, especially in this environment. I hope that was helpful, Grace.
Thank you, Candice. Definitely plan and plan often, right? Like, and updating our plans along the way, especially when we're facing an unprecedented situation as we are today.
Absolutely.
So as a follow-on to that, because you mentioned about planning and the adjustments we have to make, I want to shift to Kara. Kara, as clients are readjusting to this new normal, as we call it, what are the questions that often come up in your discussions with your clients these days? What's keeping them up at night? My clients in the commercial banks a lot have been talking about PPP and PPP forgiveness, paycheck protection plan in the last couple of months. What are your clients approaching you about these days?
Thanks, Grace, and I appreciate the time and opportunity to be on the panel today with all of you. Gosh, what is keeping clients up at night? What keeps me up at night? It's I think a lot of the same things. I would say the most prevailing question that I've been receiving from my clients is about retirement planning. And certainly going through a pandemic, I don't know about you, Candice, but unfortunately, I didn't model it into my retirement plan projections for my clients. And as a result of that, it just means that it's really critical, it's imperative that you have the right asset allocation. And what I mean by that is you have the right asset allocation with the different investment buckets that you are choosing and selecting for your clients. And what that does is it really allows for the smoothing out of volatility when we are faced with extraordinary times, challenging times, events where we saw over a 30% decline in the equity markets in a very brief period of time. Those moments are incredibly stressful, not only for us as wealth advisors, but more importantly for our clients who entrust us with their financial security. So I wish I could have said my crystal ball was clear and I projected the pandemic. I did not. But what I was able to do is ensure that my clients had the right flexibility within their portfolios to ride out these extraordinary times. And I think for women in particular, let's face it, we live longer than men. There's probably a very good reason why. No need to debate it here today, but we do. And I think for women in particular, going back to your point, Grace, I think that there can sometimes be a fear of thinking about your financial situation, doing the planning that is so imperative to really create a financial situation that provides that security. I think that the fear is that we're going to outlive our money. And I think if you can work with someone who is able to put the right plan in place, that provides a tremendous amount of confidence and security that you can now think less about and think more about the many different things that as women we kind of juggle in our lives.
Thank you, Kara. That's a very good point. We do tend to live longer. Research shows that on average, women live at least 5 years longer than men, which means they start taking care of their elderly in the family or spouse or partners that outlive them, and that all impacts their financial situation. Then add on the complexity of many of this retirement planning models that we all often rely on does not take into account the potential time off from work that women often take for childbearing or raising a family or adjusting to homeschooling in the middle of pandemic, how it is today. So definitely, I wish your crystal ball would be clear and you would share some more outputs with us. I want to shift to Nhaman, going back on what Candice and Kara said on planning often, and definitely with the volatility, Kara referenced 30% market fluctuation. It's hard not to get emotional or nervous. So from your conversations with your clients, how do you advise them so that they don't make decision based on emotions or knee-jerk reactions? Well, what are the conversations like?
Absolutely, Grace. I mean, what a timely place to have this discussion. And, you know, I think I would start by saying that that is a big ask, right? I mean, there's plenty of books written on behavioral finance and lectures and courses that are offered on that. And so where we recognize is that, look, first and foremost, we're all human, right? And when there's stress in the marketplace, usually that translates to stress in the environment. And so what we have found is it's not a science in terms of how to minimize or help clients through this process to make sound decisions. It's really more of a discipline. And, you know, dovetailing on what Candice and what Kara have already shared, I think really the key word in this economic sort of pandemic time is action and making a plan of action, right? And this is especially true not just in a volatile market time, but also when when the markets are high. You need to be able to plan for both the upside and the downside. So what does that mean? Well, I think we can all relate to the fact that when you're stressed or when things around you are falling apart, it's probably the worst time to sit down and try to have a reasonable, rational conversation, especially around your finances. And so what we've tried to do is we try to meet regularly with our clients and really help them come up with a plan. I love the word roadmap that Candice used, because that's exactly what it is. And this roadmap can be flexible, like Kara had mentioned, in terms of how your assets are allocated, so that for a short term to a midterm or long term, right, not knowing where we are in this cycle of this pandemic and other things, there's really a roadmap of some peace of mind for our clients. So what is typically in that plan? We try to evaluate what are our clients' cash flow needs, right? We basically have found that if our clients' basic needs are met, then that will provide them some peace of mind. So really, what are the expenses that are required to maintain your living? And how do we get the portfolio to a place that produces the requisite amount of income to produce those cash flows in order for the client to maintain their lifestyle? The other thing is, what are the client's short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals, right? And take that into consideration in terms of when there might be some liquidity needs down the road. Candice mentioned risk tolerance, and obviously that's personal to everybody, to every investor. And I think the other thing that's worth mentioning is what's the vehicle in which the client's portfolio is in. So a lot of our clients are in the ultra high net worth space, which means that they've done the requisite planning that Candice has alluded to. And so they have various trust vehicles that they make investments through, some of which are for their children, so there's a longer time horizon to think about, some of which could be for family members who have more immediate needs, and so on and so forth. So just thinking about the vehicles in which you invest. And two of the things that I want to point out for the plan is when thinking about the cash flow needs, making sure to invest in a way, like I said, to sustain the lifestyle of the client. So even in a down market, perhaps the market value of that investment may have gone down, but at least you can ensure that there's some cash flow that's coming from there. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is just identifying if there's any liquidity needs. Even though there's a pandemic, people are still getting married, so there's planning for a wedding. People are still buying homes during this time, right? In some cases, there's industries where businesses are still expanding. So really recognizing, is there a liquidity need in the immediate future, and making sure that your portfolio is invested in a way, or you have an asset where it's easily liquidated and it's not severely tied to the market, so that there could be some issues if you were forced to sell that in a loan with low values.
Thank you, Nhaman, for that perspective. You mentioned about the roadmap, which is basically creating a plan, like Kara and Candice have referenced before, and also taking advantage of investing appropriately depending on their risk tolerance. Now, I'm referencing back again to the Merrill Lynch report that 41% of women says that their biggest financial regret is not investing enough. And in the long run, even if a man and a woman were to work the same amount of time in the workforce, gaining about the same amount of money, at the end of it, not investing, put the woman at a disadvantage overall. That could easily be to the tune of almost $1 million over their lifetime. So that's significant. So I'm going back to Candice. Many people are not in a position to invest today. So they probably want to focus on what Nhaman was saying about budgeting and creating a roadmap. What are some of the steps that people can start taking to face that first step to create the budget, and especially during this time?
Sure. Financial planning really isn't just for the wealthy. The first step is to start by setting financial goals. And, a good financial plan is typically guided by these financial goals that you determine. And if you approach your financial planning from the standpoint of what your money can do for you, whether it's buying a house or retiring early, you'll make your savings plan more intentional. So, financial goals inspirational as well. What do you want to have your life look like in the next 5, 10, 20 years? how do you imagine your retirement? Starting with the goals that help inspire you to take those next steps, like Nhaman had mentioned, will help guide you to make those aspirations a true reality. Next, I think tracking your money and redirecting it towards your goals is another piece to think about. Getting a sense of your monthly cash flow, using that roadmap to see what's in, what's going out, seeing where your money goes will actually help you develop immediate, medium, and long-term plans. And nobody likes the big bad B word, right? Budget. It's important to develop a budget and determine how much you really need to save every month to attain your savings goal to help you intentionally make the right financial decisions for you and your family. And for those who are just starting out, saving for an emergency is likely a top priority. So start small. As you continue to do that, see if you can save a little bit more. Building good credit also will help you provide the options that you need when you need it, so that you're taking advantage of the best rates. And then this too will help you budget with your budgeting by getting cheaper rates on insurance and saving more in general. And then lastly, tackle your debt to pay down the high interest rate debt, such as credit cards. Once you begin struggling with too much revolving debt with high interest rate payments, it will just be too difficult to get out of that hole. So, another step is to build on your savings and take advantage of any employee-sponsored retirement plans, such as IRAs, 401ks. So don't forget to take the full match of what your employer is providing to avoid leaving money on the table, so long as you're able to financially do so. And finally, maximize the amount you can contribute and diversify your investments in those accounts.
Thank you, Candice, for that. And yes, definitely when you mention about budgeting, it's a necessary thing that we always have to face and take into account, definitely. And great reminder about taking advantage of employee-sponsored programs as a starting point to invest and start saving. I still remember almost 20 years ago, my first job here at Bank of America as a part-time teller, and on a Saturday afternoon, the branch manager set us all down, the part-time tellers who were college kids at that time, to enroll on a 401k. We didn't know what it was, but she made sure that we took advantage of it. And that was such a great financial mentoring now that I'm looking back and talking about this with you guys. Thank you for that. Now, I'm going back again to Kara and Nhaman, and maybe Nhaman, I'll start with you first. If we have a budget now, we have some money to set aside, what have you seen that the investment allocation mixes that has changed in 2020? Anything that's noticeable that you can share with the team here?
Sure. So there's two primary things that I've seen. The first is a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs. Most are operating a business still. Some have recently had a liquidity event. But what we're seeing is for a lot of our entrepreneurial clients who are operating an existing business, they tend to take the most risk when it comes to their own business ventures, right? And so when they invest with us, they're really looking more towards capital preservation and definitely more of a conservative portfolio. And typically what we've seen in the past is we can put them in a fixed income portfolio and they could be rest assured that they could pick up a decent income, like 1.5%, 2%. So nothing dramatic, but a decent income. Well, with the way that interest rates, the current low interest rate environment, that is no longer the case. Fixed income is really yielding very, very low returns. And so what we're seeing for these entrepreneurial clients is that we're extending and we're looking at investing a sleeve of their fixed income in slightly higher yield fixed income products, like for instance, higher yield municipal bonds, preferreds, private debts, things that are probably would be considered a little bit lower credit quality than what they would normally have in their portfolio. So there's a little bit more risk correlated with that, but at least, or even slightly longer duration, just to replace a little bit of what they were seeing before, because that's no longer the case. The second thing, which is on the flip side, is that we also have clients who want to take exposure off of their portfolio, and maybe this is given their age. They're on the higher end of the age spectrum, and they want to invest in something a little bit more conservative, obviously. And what we've seen is, given that like Kara had mentioned, markets were down 30% at the beginning of this year, right? That's actually opened up a lot of conversations with these clients who typically have zero exposure to public equity, the public equity market, to really start having a conversation just because the opportunity was very ripe. They had cash on the sidelines, and essentially the idea of getting into the public equity markets at a discount for a very small portion of their portfolio made sense, and it's actually really paid off for them. So those are sort of the two things that we've seen.
Thank you, Nhaman, for that perspective. Kara, what are you seeing? Any changes in the asset allocation these days?
Sure. I would say that definitely as the markets had sold down, and again, to Nhaman and Candice's prior comments as well, going back to the asset allocation. So the majority of my clients also ultra high net worth individuals, but we invest primarily in the public markets. We do some private equity investing, but I would say we're primarily solving through the public markets. And during that sell-off, we took an opportunity to upgrade our portfolio, which means that we took some tax losses. We shifted more from a core value bias that we had coming into 2020 and shifted more toward a large cap growth bias. And that obviously paid off in significant reward, because that area of the market has done and continue to do exceptionally well. So it wasn't that we made major moves, but we took an opportunity to make minor shifts along the way that ultimately ended up being really accretive to our clients. And I just want to go back just for a moment, Grace, only because you've talked and shared some from that Merrill piece about women not wanting to talk about their finances. And I know that a lot of the people on this panel or who are participating in this series aren't the ultra high net worth. And so there are some really basic things that we can do as investors to really change our trajectory. And one, the best way is invest, enroll, contribute to your 401k. So just a little segue, but I do think it's really important for our younger viewers. Start early. That compounding impact is enormous and can make up that $1 million that you were mentioning, Grace.
Definitely, Kara. Thank you for that. Yes, starting early was definitely a benefit, and I'm very appreciative to the manager who sat me down to set up my first 401k contribution at that time. So as we are coming up towards the end of this, I want to wrap around for the three of you, Candice, Nhaman, and Kara. What are opportunities that currently our audience participants listening in can take advantage right now? Kara, you definitely mentioned about participating in employee sponsored programs, but any other things that we could be sharing and start doing after this panel is over? Maybe start with Candice again, or Kara, you want to go first? Go ahead.
Sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject. For our clients, as the year comes to an end, we're again thinking about the impact of the election and what changes could be on the horizon depending upon what the outcome might look like. So it's thinking about wealth transfers. I think, Candice, you may have touched a little bit about this. Again, it's not only maybe for thinking about your children, but also your grandchildren. So doing those planning, utilizing those planning techniques that can really make a significant difference down the road. It's a great time to think about charitable giving, using low basis securities, setting up a donor advised fund. This is a great time of year to begin thinking about it as we come to the end, and we're getting a lot of requests from charities who are certainly in need as a result of the pandemic. I would say that for individuals, again, start thinking early, planning early, and no amount of money is too small to start investing. So again, it's about the budgeting, it's about paying attention to how you spend your money, and then charting a course for you to create your own financial freedom, whatever that might look like. For different people, it's different solutions, but it's identifying what's important to you and then implementing that decision.
Thank you, Kara. Candice, last final comments of what audience can take away from here?
Sure. So, like Nhaman and Kara had suggested, purchasing, some equities when they're on sale is, a good strategy now. But the two that I think for this group that might be helpful are, one, lowering your costs, looking for ways to reduce your expenses, such as, lowering your auto insurance, for example. Many of us are really not driving as many miles under normal circumstances. So, inquire on reducing your mileage and then, saving a little bit of money on your premiums while you're really not driving. And then the other thing is refinancing your debt if possible. So for those who have mortgages, rates are at historic lows. So locking in a lower rate, lower fixed rate is a tremendous opportunity. So if you're in a purchase, or if you're in a position to purchase a new home, getting a new mortgage. So it also applies to investment real estate, although, Southern California prices are relatively high in comparison to other parts of the country. But just, a couple of tips that I've been taking advantage of as well.
Thank you, Candice. So Nhaman, final comments. What should be the takeaway for our participants today?
Absolutely. I definitely echo Kara and Candice. In fact, those were some of the things on my list. And I guess the one thing that hasn't been mentioned, where what we're seeing for some of our clients is along the way, obviously we've been rebalancing our clients' portfolios. And I know that I've heard from a lot of clients that are concerned about potential increase in income tax rates, post-election in 2021. And so what we've been seeing with, along with the anxiety of our clients as it relates to the market volatility and their concern around potential income tax increases in 2021, as we've been rebalancing our clients' portfolio, we actually have been taking some gains, booking some gains in terms of just easing their sensitivity around that, knowing that already it was a good ride on this asset and rebalancing. And so that's kind of eased a little bit in terms of what potential income taxes might look like for 2021.
Thank you, Nhaman, for that. Thank you, Candice, Kara, and Nhaman for being part of the panel and for the discussion today. Thank you for together. We overcome the typical reluctance to talk about money because this is a start. So for everybody participating today, I encourage and invite you to start talking about money planning. In fact, encourage to be financial mentors to also others, because down the line, there might be others like me who benefited from the tips and nuggets that you would be sharing with them. Josh and the LA Business Journal team, thank you for including us in this discussion. We've come quite a long way as women in our financial journey. We now can sign our own loans, get credit cards, and even start our own business. All great things, but the journey is still on. So we should continue to have this conversation, often, frequent, and especially during turbulent times. Thank you again. Josh, I'm passing it back to you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you to Candice, Nhaman, and Kara for another really important conversation today. How about a round of applause, a virtual round of applause for our first two panels, just really important information. Our final panel of the day is going to take a look at the ever challenging and definitely rewarding with a lot of upside road to entrepreneurship. Each of our panelists have proven success at business and as being entrepreneurs and founders. They have amazing stories, and we're extremely excited to hear from them and have us joining today. Please join our final group of panelists for the day. Gail Becker, founder and CEO of Power. Trish Halamandaris, director of the UCLA Anderson Venture Accelerator at UCLA Anderson. Ksenia Yudina, founder and CEO of UNest Advisors. And today's moderator, one of the LA Business Journal's previous Women's Leadership Award winners, Frances Moreno, managing partner and co-founder of VACO Los Angeles. Frances, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Josh. It's really exciting for me to be able to see the mentor panel, to be able to hear the navigating today's finance panel, and it's my pleasure to moderate the road to entrepreneurship with such a powerful group of women this afternoon, let's say. So, recent studies have shown that for every dollar of funding that women-founded startups generate 78 cents, whereas the male-founded startups only generate 31 cents. There's a clear financial incentive to close the financial and gender gap. And these women today have done it. So I'm super excited to get right into it and direct the first question to Gail Becker. Gail, just a week ago, you became the awardee, the Entrepreneur of the Year for the EY Entrepreneur of the Year Award. And you are one of the most successful business entrepreneurs today in the world of food. But just prior to starting your company, Power, you had no experience in the industry. So I'm sure our listeners want to know, how did you go from corporate executive to founder and CEO?
Well, thank you. As I like to say, when I started, my hair was straight. You know, when I started, I didn't know anything about food other than I cooked it, bought it, and ate it. I came from corporate America, and to be honest with you, I became really disenchanted from, you know, what I saw when I finally made it to the top of the ladder. And when I combined that with the passing of my father and the realization that, you know what, people shouldn't have to spend 90 minutes to make a pizza crust when they get home from work, that I threw all that in a blender, and I thought, probably like many people who are listening, well, I waited around for someone to do it and nobody did, so I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. And that's what I did when I launched Power in when I left my job in corporate America in May of 2016. But, you know, I had a lot of help. I hired a lot of consultants to teach me what I didn't know. And I think that's one of the most important lessons that I could pass along to any entrepreneurs out there, which is you have to feel really comfortable with what you don't know. Obviously, we all bring something to the table. I didn't know anything about food, but I knew a little bit about marketing. Be really comfortable with what you don't know, and then hire people around you to teach you how to do it better.
That's awesome, Gail. That is really great. But a lot of times people say the mother of invention is necessity, and it sounds like you really found the shortcut to making something awesome happen. And as a result, you're following your passion, and it sounds like you're living your dream. Congratulations on your recent award.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trish, you are the leading venture accelerator at UCLA Anderson. And in fact, there's a common thread throughout this panel today that everyone is affiliated through UCLA in some way, shape, or form. I'd love to hear from you, to have you talk about your firsthand experience on successful women who are creating their own companies, and why it's so important that women take the startup route.
Yeah, sure. So first, let me thank the Los Angeles Business Journal and sponsors for having us here today. It's providing these kind of tools that keep the community of women, especially in startups, moving forward, because it does take a village, somebody famous has said. In terms of women, you know, why us? And it's definitely a battle, as you're going to hear today, but one that people are doing and overcoming. Number one, we're half the world's population. Come on. Secondly, in the United States, we're the better educated half of the population. As of last year, 56% of college degrees went to women and 58% of graduate degrees went to women. So we're more than qualified. The good news is too, more and more women are getting into startups. And so I think part of the issue is, you know, like when Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that she graduated top of her class from law school and yet still cannot get hired, that stigma, that unconscious bias is still very true in the startup community and the venture capital world. But with more and more women going into it, women become normalized. What I find fascinating is that most startups are an intellectual pursuit. So why is a woman any different than a man? We're not. And in fact, I'll argue that women and entrepreneurs, just like Gail said, live their lives differently. And what you experience as a woman in the world is different than what you're going to experience as a man in the world. And women are going to solve those problems. And so, yeah, the 50% of the population are women, and we can bring that to the table in terms of solutions like what Gail and Ksenia are doing. So it is time that we kind of help level the playing field and get more and more women as partners of venture capital firms, as startup founders like these two women are doing here today, and you have done. And then interestingly, I was just reading an article the other day by Jessie Draper, who is also a venture capitalist herself, and her dad is the infamous Tim Draper, who was one of really the original venture capitalists up in Silicon Valley. And she wrote the following, and I love this. It says, imagine a future where women have access to more capital, where we are building diverse teams and founding billion-dollar businesses, where we have access to power and wealth and can use that to build a better world. We need to change the trajectory. We can do this by investing in women. This is the time we change this old school mentality with this call to action to all institutional investors, endowments, fund of funds, and family offices. As painful as 2020 has been for so many, I hope this is the turning point. Invest in women. We're not a charity. We're actually a $3 trillion opportunity.
That's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. Financial freedom, if everyone can just close your eyes and imagine complete and utter financial freedom. And that is what we're talking about. Invest in women, buy their products, and continue to advocate for these businesses. Ksenia, you are running a business, so I'd love to hear about this opportunity for us to learn more about it, because you left a great career in the finance industry and you built your own product and company. So share with us a little bit about your experience that you had, in fact, when you were seeking financing as a female entrepreneur. We'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, sure. And thanks so much for having me here today. Happy to share the story. And so one point that you brought is an interesting one, that women tend to be more successful in business than the men, right? That numbers show that once, you know, like again and again. But another statistics is that female founders only receive 2% of venture capital funding, the funding from institutional professional investors. And in my industry, so I'm in finance and fintech, I would say that that number is probably lower. It's like 0.0002% based on my estimation. And it's really, really challenging to receive funding. I would say it's challenging for women for 3 reasons. The first one is because of the unconscious bias that's real and it exists. So for example, like some of the questions that we receive as female founders around risk, right? Like what would happen if you fail? What would happen if there is a competition? What happens if the size of the market is too small? And when I talk to my male friends, founders, they tell me that the questions that they tend to get are like, how would you win the market? Or how would you be a successful leader? Or how would you fight the competition? So it's more about leadership. The second reason I would say is because we tend to have fewer connections and relationships in the industry, right? Just by virtue of not being in startups before, right? Like not that many women had the previous experience. And not only that, like, you know, sometimes I would get invited to events, fintech events, and it would be like, it's event for female founders in fintech. And I would be like, why? Why is it for female founders in fintech, not for all founders in fintech? So we kind of like tend to be like a little segregated from the community, and that limits our access to capital. And another reason is, I would say as early stage investment, women are perceived as high risk just because we have a little less experience running successful companies and fewer exits. So we do need more role models. And just to share like my own experience, we raised our seed round in August 2019, and we got some like notable investors. We raised $2 million from Northwestern Mutual, Antis Capital, Artemis Fund, Draper Dragon that Trish just mentioned, and we got a lot of support from UCLA Venture Accelerator. And I would say the reasons, like, you know, it was very hard to raise the first round of capital. The reason we been able to do it is because we received a lot of support from other women, such as Trish and Accelerator. They opened a lot of doors. They provided a ton of resources, and it was like up to me to actually take advantage of those resources. And another like great example of women helping other women was Artemis Fund. That was our lead investor who gave us a termship, and it was a group of 3 female partners, 3 female leaders who supported exceptional female entrepreneurs, and the whole thesis, the premise was investing in other women. And what was interesting, like just recently, in the middle of pandemic, we raised the second round, our Series A. It was a $9 million round, again, from great VCs. And that round, we raised much quicker, right? Like, and why did we raise it in just like 2 months in the middle of pandemic when everyone was on the lockdown? Is because it's much easier for men or women to raise on results, right? When we demonstrated that we can build a company, we can build a team, we can, you know, bring people together and can get the traction, it's much easier to raise additional funding. But I would say that women definitely deserve a chance to receive the capital at the early stage. That's where we need to initiate change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your inspiration. It's great to see that you did find funding, you are continuing to be well funded, and you are on your way and really growing. So congratulations, Ksenia. I want to address to Trish, but since we just heard from Ksenia about her experiences, what are the Los Angeles ecosystem resources that are available to entrepreneurs? And with regards to accelerators, you know, funding and other sources, being at UCLA, I know that's your specialty, and we'd love to understand what are some of the sources.
Sure. LA is a really interesting market. Right now, we're about 1/3 of the capital that the Bay Area is, but it's being noted that because of the diversity of the industry, fashion, transportation, entertainment, healthcare, B2C, that LA actually has the potential in the long run to be the top market in the US. So it's a key point today because interestingly, this panel and the whole conference is about diversity. I think that's really true about the LA market and what we're seeing in terms of founders. Diversity is key, and diversity is bringing in the money, both in money and in performance. So I'll say that about the LA market. And Ksenia just noted that it is really important to have resources at the early stage. It's really true. I actually would argue that I think early stage might be the hardest because a lot of the resources have moved up to Series A, where there's less risk because there's already financial performance. But there are great ideas and a ton of really sound founders like Gail and Ksenia, who at one point needed that help. So for LA specifically, there are a ton of accelerators in the early stage. You know, UCLA Anderson, we take founders who are not affiliated with UCLA, as we're a public university, so we view part of our charter is to help the city. Techstars LA, we view ourselves as an off-ramp, an on-road to Techstars, and they do invest. Grid 110 in downtown LA, Amplify, Backstage Capital, Stubbs Alderton, Micro Capital. People can contact me if they want, but the point is there are tremendous resources in LA. And what's nice about LA too is it's very collaborative because the resourcing is as different as the market is. So it really comes down to the founder and your industry, but it's there. You know, a nod to the first panel today, mentors. I'm a huge believer in mentors. I never had one, I still don't have one. And I view it hugely profound in somebody's career path. And so when you can get a mentor, please do so. Funding. Funding is key. There's 4 types of funding typically for early stage founders: debt, venture capital, crowdfunding, angel investors. So debt are the banks like that are sponsoring us today: Wells Fargo, UBS, Union Bank. Especially for people who are doing capital goods like Gail, where you've got assets. Often initial round of debt might not be the bad way to do that instead of giving up equity. VCs, fund of funds, family offices. There are a lot of early stage, there's a lot of early stage capital in LA: Crosscut, Alpha Edison, to name a few. Crowdfunding, Kickstarter, it's a perfectly fine way to go. There's equity crowdfunding, a different animal. AngelList, Circle Up, Fundable are some. Angel investors, the larger organizations are Tech Coast Angels, Pasadena Angels, a lot of high net worth individuals or founders who have had exits invest. And then last but not least are the universities or organizations who do business plan competitions for non-dilutive funding. UCLA, Rice University, and this week is Women's Founder Network, WFN, great organization. They do a business plan competition with non-dilutive funding as well.
Trish, this is like a fast forward MBA, more like a PhD to everyone who's watching.
Excellent.
There are
Excellent.
1,000 people are going to,
yeah.
Thank you so much for giving us that wealth of knowledge. And I know we're packing so much into a short amount of time, but that is really valuable to know that there are a lot of funding. And it's true, high net worth individuals, angel investors, private equity, there's loans. Gail, I wanted to ask you, how did you kind of bootstrap your company? How did you get started going from financial or, being in the corporate disenchantment to being your own founder and your own CEO? How did your funding work for you?
Yeah, so I self-funded initially. Not that it lasted me very long, but I basically emptied out my savings account. I sold my clothes online. I never went out. I left every luxury I ever knew in my old life and moved on. And so I did take, I like to say, I bet everything I had on a vegetable. But that only lasted me so long. And so when it came, so we launched in February of 2017, and by September of that year, we were out of money. I did talk with a lot of VC firms, a lot. And I was really clear that I wanted to speak with firms that specialized in food, because I knew this was a, part of the background that I didn't have. So I really wanted smart money. It's easy to get money. It's a lot harder to get smart money. And so what I ultimately did was I talked to a lot of people. And interestingly enough, in that very first round, even though we were already in market and about to go into Walmart. So we were going into Walmart in October and I was looking for money in September. A lot of people turned me down, a lot. And one of the reasons, and I think, both of the other panelists touched on it briefly, but, they turned me down because I think as a woman, I was held to a higher standard. Even, they wanted to see more data, even though they didn't know how it was going to be perceived in Walmart. So there was a lot of questions. Well, if we could just wait a couple more months, then we'd give you money. Well, guess what? I didn't have a couple months. I was out. And so there was, one very prominent food VC who said, you know what? We believe in the brand and we believe in you, and we're going to give you the money now. And when it came time to closing my second round, all of the other VCs who, needed a little bit more time, the first time around, all were falling over themselves to give me money, couldn't write checks big enough or fast enough. But I turned them down because, when you're an entrepreneur, that early trust, that early faith, that early loyalty means everything. And so I gave that VC firm that took a bet on me, I gave them a chance to reinvest. And to this day, they have been my only investor.
That's amazing, Gail. What a great story. And that's to all aspiring entrepreneurs. At first, it could be difficult, but you want to get to that point where you're turning down sources of funding, where you're really able to pick and choose. Ksenia, what are the most, maybe one or two of the most challenging aspects of being an entrepreneur today, just to switch gears and just talk about a couple of the challenges and maybe what's the most rewarding thing about being an entrepreneur. Let's start with you, Ksenia.
Sure. I would say like, like one of the challenges during this particular time, during the pandemic, is being able to manage team remotely and grow team remotely and build a culture, right? Because like if you are part of well-established corporation, it's much easier, right? Like everyone knows their place, everyone knows what they're doing. We hired 50% of the team during the pandemic remotely. I've never talked to people in person. 25% of the team right now working from other cities than LA. They're working from Washington, they're working from Chicago and San Francisco. So it's just really hard to kind of put, as a growing early stage company, to build the culture without personal interaction. Another challenge, I would say, just like changing priorities. Again, like I came from corporate background where we had predictability. Like we knew what's coming in next month and next year. Being an entrepreneur, especially like when you're trying to disrupt a very, old-fashioned industry, you have to change your priorities quickly, and you have to adapt, and you have to adjust, and you have to learn from the market, from the customers, from business partners. So like, that's kind of like, it was an interesting learning experience. And another challenge, I would say, just giving up your life-work balance or work-life balance, because it does not exist. I don't know how other female leaders, feel about it, but for me, like, that's definitely something that I gave up. It's like, it's work 24/7. But it's all worth it. So in terms of the most rewarding aspects of being an entrepreneur, I would say, is just like seeing your idea come to life, right? And seeing that your vision inspires other people, right? And like my vision was to build something that would help parents build a better future for their kids and change the destiny of the entire generation by helping parents prepare, early, and maybe solving the student debt in the country 10 years from now. And just seeing like how many people are backing that vision and, invest in you and join the team and, just like have trust in you. I think that that's like my biggest inspiration, and that's what gives me like a drive and energy to just push forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, because I think all of us couldn't agree with you more that if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to have passion for it. It's a lot of work, especially during COVID and being virtual, but following your passion and doing what you love and creating opportunities for others is incredible. Gail, let me ask you the same question. I know we're going to be coming to a close very soon. Can you give us your the top challenge and also the best reward in being an entrepreneur?
Sure. The top challenge, and my kids aren't here, so I can say this, having a company is like having, in my case, it would be my third child, and it needs all of the nurturing, all of the time, all of the passion that you give to your kids. There is literally nothing else. So people don't understand why I don't have 20 minutes to be on the phone, or I can't go to this event or what have you. It is literally the most all-consuming thing I have ever done. Love every minute, but it is like nothing I have ever encountered, and just trying to have people understand your commitment to the business can be challenging. I would say on the plus side, if I could just make a plug really quickly, I do think this is a great time to start a business, primarily for that for that very reason. I tried to start Cauliflower when I was in corporate America. You know what? Really hard to start a business between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. when you're trying to fly across the country, and I had all these meetings and I had kids or whatever. Now I think is a wonderful time to start the business. There is more time. You're not traveling. Many people are working from home. There's just a lot more ability to concentrate, and we've never had more problems to solve, which is just the perfect petri dish in which to be able to start a business and follow your passion. In terms of the most rewarding part, that's super easy for me. Helping people and nourishing people. I hear from people on social media or letters or calls, you know, what a difference we have made in their life, that they don't have to worry about dinner. They don't have to feel guilty about what they're serving kids. It gives them more time to do what they love. And that's extraordinary. I have always loved, I'm not a foodie, but I've always loved feeding people. And no one ever said to me, you should do what you love. Nobody ever told me that in my whole lifetime. And so now I feel compelled that I just want to tell any budding entrepreneurs out there that they really should do what they love, because even though I've never been poorer, I've never been busier, I've never been more harried, I've also never been happier. And just to thank everybody out there, I want to offer anyone who's watching free cauliflower. So send us a direct message at cauliflower on social and mention Road to Entrepreneurship. And anyone who's listening can have a free product just to hopefully make someone's life a little bit easier.
Thank you, Gail. That's so generous of you. And I love your advice. You know, just do what makes you happy. You know, do what makes you happy, and it's the right thing, and it will benefit yourself and others. Trish, I do have one more question, if we can spare just a few more moments. So the LA Business Journal has written numerous stories about companies that are showing incredible innovation and that are really thriving, you know, and we at VACO have seen a lot of M&A activity, a lot of IPO readiness going on. So we know that the market continues to thrive. Can you give us a success story or two that you've heard about over the course of this year? We'd love that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I do think in order for this ecosystem to thrive, it takes structure still to some base level. And, you know, I do want to give, you know, like Betsy Berkemer, who did 2020 Women on Boards, or Kamala Harris, who we see out front and center right now. Like, we're seeing role models in a variety of roles. And what is very different, I think, right now, more than when I was coming through my career, is that women are supporting women. 30 years ago, women were competitive with women, no more. And I think this conference illuminates that, which warms my heart. We need to elevate each other, and that is the purpose of what we're doing and why we're here today even. But in terms of successes, you know, you're seeing a lot of, I'm a total tomboy and I play a lot of tennis. So I'm gonna say a lot of professional athletes are using their platform right now to get into business, and everyone who knows me will know that this is no surprise. I'm gonna say Serena Williams has definitely leveled up her game. She has a fund for early stage founders for minority and women. So check her out, check out her fund. In addition to her other businesses, she sits on the board of SurveyMonkey and other businesses. So that impresses me. And I love to see women who have platforms stick doing it. And I think today, you know, I think there's no formula. The road to success is not a straight line. It is very jagged, and there's a lot of change. And I think you have to enjoy that and have a stomach for that kind of risk. You know, in terms of success, obviously all of you three here on this panel, but, you know, just because I'm at UCLA, we had an early stage company led by a woman named Nicole Gear who got bought. I'm sure you guys know the brand YouTube. Susan Wojcicki is an Anderson alum. Martine Rothblatt did Sirius XM and United Therapeutics. There's a woman who was an Anderson alum who's from Latin America, went to Mexico and basically opened up and is doing well with what's called FitPass, which is kind of the class pass there. So all flavors, all different types. It comes back to what your interest is. It's a long journey. It's not fast, so you got to love it, but do it.
Yes, you do have to love it. And it's just about getting started. I'm so glad we talked about funding. We talked about the inspiration. We talked about leaving, you know, the corporate environment and going into become an entrepreneur because of necessity. And I want to thank you all. I'd love for each of you to give us one word of inspiration, your power word, if you will, your resilience word that to leave the audience with. And I'll start with you, Ksenia. Top of mind.
Yeah, I would say that if you decide to pursue this route, you know, like this challenging road to entrepreneurship, just don't give up, ever. It's going to be challenging. It's not easy. And you will get a lot of rejections, and rejections is just a part of the journey. It's very natural. You just need to keep pushing and just find the right people I always compare fundraising as like to dating. You know, it's just a very long, you know, way to find the right partners.
I love it. Don't give up. That's beautiful. Gail, what would be your inspiration or encouragement? You're muted. I'm sorry. Okay.
Bet on yourself. If you don't, no one else ever will.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And Trish, what would be your inspiration for the audience today?
So you make an impact in your life. The only thing you own is your name and your brand. So whatever you do in your interactions and building a business, in your family, make an impact.
Thank you all. Never give up, bet on yourself, and make an impact. Back to you, Josh Schimmels, and thank you all so very much for this road to entrepreneurship. We look forward to your journey and cheering you on. Congratulations on your success. Josh.
Well, thank you, Francis. Outstanding panel. You know, so many things were said in there that I took note of and I wrote down. Ksenia, you said, you know, never give up. That reminds me of something. When I used to do Ironman triathlon, I would actually write on my arms, "Don't stop moving, don't give up." So that throughout the entire long process in the day, no matter how bad things got, I would look down and look at the markers on my arms, and it said, "Don't stop moving, don't give up." And that same mentality is true for entrepreneurs in business. And I also love, Trish, your comment about the road to entrepreneurial success is not straight, it's jagged. I think that's such a clear statement that I think we can all relate to when we think of the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows of business. So I want to thank all of you for being a part of this. Ksenia, Francis, Trish, and Gail, really, really interesting panel, very inspiring. Thank you for your time and congratulations on all the success that each of you is having. Really a big round of applause and thank you to all of today's moderators, our panels. We had yet another intriguing and dynamic afternoon of conversations. If you've enjoyed the last 2 weeks of panels, you're definitely not going to want to miss our awards next week. We've got our keynote speaker, and very similar to that of our panelists and our moderators, next week's finalists and honorees are absolutely inspiring, and we're going to be sharing their stories as well. So until then, we look forward to seeing you online. Make sure you look at the live poll results online and in Monday's issue of the LABJ. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Good afternoon.